Thank you again for coming, and please say hello to Claire Schneider.
Wow. Thanks you all for coming. Thank you, UB, for bringing your students who are taking Arts 1. Is that right? Is that the name of the class?
Correct.
So I am going to be an interesting introduction to the art world. So I have been a curator for a long time, I think going on almost 20 years, which is kind of amazing. And when John asked, well, I should say thank you, John, for inviting me here, and thank you for being such a great peer over the years. Can everyone hear me? Do I have to stand right in front of this thing? I can hear you. So, in John fashion, he wrote a very funny email, kind of trying to make this invitation light and saying we could talk about whatever we want, talk about saucy antidotes, deconstruct our favorite television shows or our high school journals. We could read those out loud. We could have a drum kit. There's also a piano. We could sing. Well, I can't sing at all. So my journals would not be interesting from high school. But around the same time, someone sent me this picture. And I do love to garden, and I love the natural world. And here's a picture of me foraging on July 4th of last year. So I decided to riff on this. And like the title of this talk, I wanted to think about what a curator does through this lens. So first, I wanted to think about the curator as a caretaker. What does that mean? The word curator comes from like just the word to care for. Traditionally, curators have taken care of collections of objects. Even these cabinet of curiosities, people would go out when the museums were being founded and go collect things in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, all these gorgeous things, artworks, fossils, probably stuffed birds, and show them all in a collection, and kind of as a way to show their curiosity about the world and somewhat about their status, about being able to go out into the world and find things. So as a curator and someone who's worked at museums, I think it's taking care of those objects, just their physical care, but also taking care of the ideas of what those objects are about and helping to even form those collections and think about that, and then of course present them. And I also like the idea of that art is kind of a living thing. It's just like a plant. If you put it in this sunlight or this situation, it will kind of look this way and grow this way or tell this story. And if you put it in this exhibition or you tell these kinds of stories, it will kind of have this other kind of meaning. So it can kind of change. And I guess that was one of the joys of being at the Albright Knox, was being able to put things in so many different contexts, and then even see contemporary artists respond to historical work and how they understood it. So foraging. Here I am. I'm actually foraging for ramps, and it's ramps when they're actually bulbs. And foraging, what is that? Going out into the world where you are right now, a forest, and finding the things that are there, kind of being more intelligent about the world you live in. So, it's obviously a food metaphor. Most of the time we go shopping at the grocery store. What do we have? We get all the things that are there. Someone has collected them. And now that more and more people are interested in being thoughtful about what they eat, about the environment, some people are getting more and more interested about what about the stuff that's right outside, what's right in my local habitat. So, I'm someone who's interested in that, and actually this lecture gave me the opportunity to talk to some older artists I have worked with, or artists in the past, and someone said, well, yes, I was taught, I'm getting my MFA now, that curating is, it's just about going shopping in the world, and it is a little bit sometimes, going to see what galleries have and going to find that, but I would say there is this kind of thrill of going to find something before it's kind of been predetermined as an important piece of art by a gallery system. So, which is something we got to do a lot of with Beyond in Western New York. I guess that was my crash course in art foraging. And then incubating. So I'll tell you more about this as the talk goes on, but I think more and more I really see one of my skills and one of my interests is really helping artists grow ideas, helping ideas grow, kind of taking them and seeing what will happen, getting in on the beginning stage, whether it's helping an artist do a commission at a museum or more and more helping creative people work with other artists and maybe even helping spawn a business. So I had some fun examples here. I'm going to stay with the gardening metaphor a little bit while longer. And I wanted to talk about two things at once, kind of. Since I've been thinking about incubating, I started Googling entrepreneurship, the curatorial spirit, and the number one, whatever Google find kind of gives you these definitions at the bottom. So passion, to be a good entrepreneur, to be a good artist, to be good at anything really, you've got to be passionate and kind of find your passion. And so one of my passions is tomatoes. And I really have grown tons of tomatoes, and I try to keep myself to maybe 30 kinds of tomato plants every year, and I can't kind of keep myself from it. And this was a really good harvest in 2010, and I did help start Urban Roots Community Garden Center and started the Heirloom Seedling Program back in probably 2003, 4. We were even selling the seedlings on the side of the road there before there was a building. But I guess for me, it's almost beauty to be interested in all these different flavors and types of plants. But at the same time, wanting all that diversity, wanting all that beauty kind of has a political statement too. It creates people keeping alive all these varieties of things. We don't live in a monoculture. I was trying to think of a good example of foraging, and I remember that I actually have a blog. You can go find it if you go to Tumblr and search this word, 0 Mile Food. And basically I was actually having a little bit of fun with all the people who said they were just going to eat everything in a 100-mile radius of their house. And I thought, what happens if I just eat everything in my house, in the cabinets, in the freezer, right here? So this is my, it's part of my spirit to want to go foraging. And then lastly, here are some seedlings. And I think that's kind of what's interesting for me is when you work with an artist that nobody knows about, or you work with an artist that's well known and you want to help them foster a new part of their career. It's really like that point of growing a seed into a seedling. And if anyone's done any gardening, that's the hardest thing, which is why we go buy seedlings from somebody else, because it's hard. That's the time you really have to pay a lot of attention. You can't miss watering. You want to have the best sun. So anyway, passion, I should think about these words, how it can be done better. I guess I'm always someone who's questioning things and trying to problem solve, so I think to do anything new, to take risks, you've got to be optimistic, always be hopeful. Obviously, risks, they go together for me. And then if you're an artist here or anyone, obviously you just have to do it. So I've got to practice at that now that I've even been more of a entrepreneur starting my own organization. Okay. How far away from this thing can I get?
I think you can get pretty far away.
Okay, good. I would like to not stand in front of there. I was at the Albright Knox for 10 years. I came in the fall of 1998, straight from living in Ireland, where I had been doing some things at a museum there. So I could talk forever about that place. I'm going to talk about 3 shows quickly. And this is one of my favorite shows. It was just a collection show. It was just one room. But I really loved being able to put unusual work together. So the Albright Knox is really known for abstract expressionism, and if I could pick one painting to me that felt like the soul of the Albright Knox, it would be Jackson Pollock's Convergence, which is, for people who don't know art, that piece right there, done in the late 50s. I wasn't going to read this, but now are all these art students here. I think young people here, I might, let me find the part I was going to not talk about. So bear with me here. Okay, so Jackson Pollock. This was when that painting was made in the late 50s, all of a sudden America took over the art world. It was the important painting. It was the important work that, made America. And Alfred Barr, who was the major curator at the Museum of Modern Art, said, it represented the stubborn, difficult, even desperate effort to discover the self. I paint, therefore I am. But what I found interesting is, of course, the understanding of this painting over time changes. So then people saw it as an example of the modern day Daniel Boone venturing into an uncharted and dangerous aesthetic wilderness, the ultimate heroic American individual. And it was this triumph of American painting. It was like big landscape painting. Okay, well, time goes on, and by the 80s and 90s, people had kind of enough of that. They said it was the cowboy rebel, quintessential tortured soul of American painting. Pollock is also seen as emblematic of an aggressive, out-of-control masculinity. The work could be described as, quote, being born out of violence against previous imagery and against the notion of good painting. So it had all of these gendered overtones, and that was something that Andrew Perchek wrote in an essay called Pollock and Post-War Masculinity, and that was what I wrote about this label. So it was exciting for me to say, this is a great painting, I love this painting, but its meaning changes continually over time. And then I put it with work that you wouldn't always see it with. It wasn't just with Franz Klein, a piece that was made at the same time. This is Sue Williams, and you can't see it very closely, but there's all of these kind of orifices in there. It was kind of a feminist, I want to say F-U to Jackson Pollock. This is David Hammond's. And I want to tell you a little bit about this painting by Glenn Ligon, which you can't even barely see, because that's part of the point. And there's a few things I have to read, so bear with me. So this is a piece, a lot of these African-American artists, and Glenn Ligon was a really important representative of this generation that were being noticed by museums and major exhibitions. And the Albright Knox brought this in 2002, the year it was painted. I went back and looked at my notes. I think it came directly from a Documenta exhibition. Anyway, the text that you can't read unless you look really hard and you struggle with it and you're in front of it in person is a text from James Baldwin's Stranger in the Village, which James Baldwin was an important African-American writer right in the 1950s and describing life as an openly gay African-American in a tiny Swiss town. He felt very isolated there. I think Glenn Ligon felt a kindred spirit with him. And so I think this painting represents the struggle. Just trying to read it represents the struggle. You can't read it. You're kind of cut out from that. You can kind of feel the feeling of not being a part of something, and you also, this isolation frustration by being overlooked by dominant forces in society. This wasn't the body of work that made Glenn Ligon famous. This was kind of the second or third work, and he started using different materials, and one was coal dust. And he said it's kind of two things at once. It's both worthless, waste, and black, and it's also beautiful, shiny, and reflective. So it has these emotional qualities that are both good and bad. There's hidden benefits. Anyway, Glenn Ligon, he loved abstract expressionism. He grew up on all this emotional angst of painting. He wanted to kind of use that language. So I think it would probably, it was exciting that he was a part of this. I could tell you about more pieces, but we're going to go on. I do love this piece by Jim Iserman. It was the last handmade piece he made. He said it was kind of minimalism in a tea cozy. And it's kind of like, what did he say? I don't think anyone ever wrote about the way it was kind of a gay piece. If there is an identity issue, this is what he wrote. I think we emailed him about this time. One of my interns helped me write this label. If there is any identity issue, it is not a didactic illustration and more an unconscious subtext that would obliquely address issues of interior decoration and homosexuality, conflating the stereotypic masculine minimalism with stereotypic feminine craft technique. And I love that you were drawn to all of these works, that it was such an unusual installation. I think it kind of was exciting. I think you kind of wanted to know more about the works. Let's see how this works. Okay, so I just wanted to, I love doing that show. I love bringing these things. Identity and abstraction weren't usually things you thought about at the same time, and you really didn't think about it at the Albright Knox. So it was a fun way to bring the works together, to think about the formal issues and the political issues at the same time. It was exciting as a young curator to be able to help kind of support communities and artists who weren't naturally coming into the Albright Knox collection in abundance. And all these works happened in 2001, and I actually went back to all of my memos back then, before there was lots and lots of internal emails, and I think I maybe made 2 or 3 or 4 presentations to the art committee to kind of talk about bringing these works in. So it was exciting that they all came. And I would say, I guess I want to emphasize, these are all by African American artists. And then we weren't just buying artists who were known on the national and international scene, but we were also buying local artists. And one of them happened in that year, the works by Layla Ali, who is from here. And I did a show that was a collaboration with Atlanta College of Art in Georgia in 2003, called Layla Ali Paintings on Paper. So this is this artist here. And this is Rodney Taylor. When you talk to Rodney, he says, of course, his work is completely influenced by growing up at the Albright Knox and going to see those paintings. So I guess I'll just say that too. What was amazing to me is so many artists and people in the art world or work in galleries or do something were very influenced by that institution being here. And I wouldn't say just that institution, I would say Hallwalls too, but this being such a rich artistic town. And I will say, I am so used to giving educational lectures, I can't do that tonight. So if anybody wants me to talk about one of these shows more in depth, I'm happy to do it. Another one of the projects I really enjoyed doing, I guess because it was such a learning experience for me, was this one called Formal Exchange, the Albright Knox in Latin America. And again, this was kind of an assignment, probably not the most prestigious one to be done, and I was told to look at the works that were from some kind of Latin connection, because the Castellani was doing a citywide consortium project called the Latin Connection, Arts Across Our Region. And well, that was fine. That was all these amazing things I found. So this is Jose Rafael Soto, Sergio Camargo, Julio Leparc. These are the same artists, Cesar Paternostro, Carlos Cruz Diaz. And these were works that were made in the 60s that were clearly influenced by modernism and people like Mondrian and all of that. But they were doing something else. And these are things that had been in the collection for years, since the 60s, but this is, whatever this date is, 2006, and I think many of them had never been on view since then, at least maybe 30 years. So I was definitely going foraging in the collection and basically got to do that a lot, and this was a great show. And I guess I found this. This is a Julio Leparc piece, and this is me probably 2 years ago at LACMA, but just showing I love this work. It's becoming more and more important. I'm trying to remember their names, but if you go to the Museum of Modern Art and major collections, this stuff is on view more and more. There's more and more research being done on this work, and this was just kind of emerging around this time 10 years ago. And it's great work. And if you're at all interested in this type of work, there's a great show called Suprasensorial Experiments in Light, Color, and Space. And a lot of these artists did do whole room installations that were very, forward-looking. And there's a lot of interesting politics into the way Latin America was choosing to use this type of modernism to create a new identity after World War II. and after, kind of as a way to step away from colonialism. Okay, so what's even crazier, talk about passion. The reason basically the Albright Knox bought all this work is because Mr. Knox, Seymour Knox, loved polo. He went to Argentina in 1927 because he liked polo. And then his son, so that's Mr. Knox, Seymour Knox, and these are his sons, or this is his son anyway. And that's why they went there. Mr. Knox, wasn't collecting art in the 20s, but by the 60s he was. And you can see, these are the old, here are them showing off. They did a show. I put it all in the case. But they also sent their largest group of works to Buenos Aires, 140 works. I don't know if anyone can read these, but it's all the best things. Delaney, Degas, Renoir, Cezanne. And I think they had, in 5 weeks, 140,000 people. So, amazing interest in this. And Albright Knox wasn't the only people sending their work abroad. The Museum of Modern Art was. But, again, I think there's interesting stories beside just the major works that are known and the curious ways that they came into the collection. So here's extreme abstraction. This was a really, really intense show. We had 240 objects in the show. 140 works were from the collection, and we did 20 site-specific installations, and probably 10 of those were brand new commissions. So that was pretty daunting and really fun all at the same time. And we really did totally transform the museum in a way that really hadn't been done before. I think this is a good, quick example. So I remember when I got here, even in the fall of 1998, people said, the museum had not reinstalled its collection in a long time. There was a part of the museum that just never changed. You would know exactly where your favorite painting was by Monet or the Marvelous Sauce or whatever. And this was right before I came. And even when I came, there was all these conversations at the museum. What's the mission of the museum? What should we focus on? And after long discussions, the museum decided we're going to keep refocusing on contemporary art. And that was something that when Louis Groucho's came, that was kind of, he ran with that. So this is what the sculpture court used to look like. And many of these paintings, this is David Smith, this is Noguchi, I think this is Bill Smith, Scott, I think this is Scott Burton, hadn't been changed in 25 years. And so when we decided to put pieces like this there, there were some board members who were uncomfortable. But it was also just thrilling and exciting to me. And then just from also being able to do commissions that saw the whole institution as this canvas, the whole building, not just two-dimensional things, but three-dimensional things. So this light piece that we all probably know and love when we get off the interstate now, it was fun to be able to decide what piece are we going to do by Leo Villarreal. And I know this is one of his first kind of transitional important pieces. And this is Jim Iserman, the same guy who had that capsule. And I was in charge of, even finding the vendor to make those. I found my calling a little bit. Okay, so it's 1998, or 2008, and I have taken a position to be the senior curator at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, and I am leaving Buffalo and moving here. So it's a new city, the space is wide open, the weather's different, a lot of things are different. But a few things are the same. There's this really big love of architecture in Phoenix and Scottsdale, and Buffalo had a great tradition of that. I had worked on some exhibitions, including one about the new visitor center for the Frank Lloyd Wright Martin House complex, and among many things. Anyway, so I get here, and they, their period of architecture is more mid-century, And this, ooh, I want to go back. This is Paolo Soleri, a really important architect from there, who had moved to work with Frank Lloyd Wright, who had Taliesin West there. But I just love this kind of dome house in the city. And so I was driving around getting to know all these things. There was a good organization there called Modern Phoenix. And if you ever go to Scottsdale and Phoenix, you should find some of these works. And this is a museum, SMOCA, and it was a repurposed movie theater by a pretty well-known contemporary architect, Will Bruder. And part of the museum's mission was modern, architecture and design. It really was one of the strengths of the community to, it was one of the strongest artistic communities in this town. So the fact that SMOCA was dedicated with this was great. And I would also say we had done shows, when I got there, called Flip a Strip, how we could reconsider shopping, like strip malls, and they had a whole artistic competition for this. So I'm driving around, and I'm not just looking for these like major pieces, but kind of smaller houses. Maybe there was even a house I could buy for myself, who knows, kind of more everyday houses. And here I am, and I see this house. And I actually see the young architects who have built this house standing in this yard, like staining their cabinets. And I think I'd maybe been in town like a week or two, like barely at all. And of course, I'm pretty friendly, so I get out and meet them. And this is what their house looked like. It really was this kind of amazing experiment with how light works. Should look at this picture, not up there. I did call, anyway, this was designed by a team of young architects who had graduated from the University of Berkeley, named Jay Atherton and Cy Keener. And, they were ambitious young guys, but they were just nobodies, really. I started to get to know them. I'm the senior curator. I'm starting to think about the exhibition schedule. And I did just talk to Cy as I was preparing this. He reminded me, so I thought, how interesting would it be if we actually gave architects the opportunity to make an art installation? So much architecture is just little models, and also, I guess the thing I wanted to say is, here we are, a young museum in Scottsdale. What can we offer the national art scene that's important? And I would say that architecture is underdone nationally in museums. There's not too many shows of this type of stuff. So we start talking, and Cy reminded me that I think I even gave him our visitor survey, like, what's our issues? We need to get people into the museum. This is one of the challenges. We have to have the numbers, right? And then I said, what about if I'm open to seeing a proposal, and I'm going to give you the worst slot. I'm going to give you the summer slot, which means it's hot. And then we're talking over 100 degrees, and we're really talking 110 degrees a lot of days. Who's going to go to the museum? So they came up with this idea. They were going to give us the experience of an ice or being in a glacier in the middle of Arizona summer at the museum. This was their idea. And I was like, okay. And they started experimenting. I think we had like over a year, or probably even over a year, maybe 14 months or 16 months of conversations where they give a proposal and we'll share it with the other curators and help them to develop it. And they built it in 2010. And what's really amazing is SMOCA has these skylights that they could channel. So that's actually looking up into that. And what you're seeing is that's actually ice. They would bring in 1,200 pounds of ice once a week, and that would melt into these like crevices. And so you could kind of get the feeling, being in a wintry place, and also that it would be different every day of the week you came. Some days it was, this kind of gorgeous, kind of pristine kind of whiteness, and then some days it would be kind of muddy, you know, it'd all be filled with water. And then the other amazing thing is, so they built this whole thing so that you could come in and experience it, and I know they used our shop, and they even had all the water. I guess they undid the irrigation system, and all this water was like sucked up and put back into the landscape. So in some ways, it was also a commentary about how to live in a place like Arizona. It requires a lot of energy, a lot of air conditioning. We had good numbers that summer, and a really enthusiastic, you know, kind of feedback from the exhibition, and also by the academics thinking about, you know, the environment in different ways. And I would say what was kind of amazing is, so that show was in the summer, but by the fall of that year, they were on the cover of Dwell, which is kind of amazing. And I should say also that Cy Keener, this one, back. Cy here, they both did 2 more exhibitions, one in San Antonio, one in Seattle. They had never done art exhibitions, and basically Cy Keener in the last couple of years has gone back to get his MFA in art, even though he was trained in architecture before at Stanford. So, and he said to me, I'm even trying to always go back to that installation, which was pretty nice to hear. Okay.